She called it curiosity, but when our hands touched, it felt like the kind of addiction neither of us wanted to escape. It started on an ordinary evening, though later I'd realize it was anything but ordinary. I was staying over at my friend's place, the way I had done countless times before. His mother had always been part of the background, polite hellos, quick smiles, the occasional question about my studies or work. She was simply his mom, and that was all. Until that night. I wandered into the kitchen after midnight, hoping to grab a glass of water. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that makes even the smallest sound echo. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the air, steady and low. The lights were dim, and the space felt softer somehow, almost secret. She was there, leaning against the counter, a robe tied loosely around her. The fabric hung casually, not revealing but not exactly modest either. She held a steaming mug between her palms, the faint scent of chamomile drifting up as she looked at me with a small, surprised smile. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice low, warm, carrying a gentleness that felt different in the stillness of the night. I shook my head, trying not to stare but finding it hard to look away. Something about her felt changed. Or maybe it was me, noticing what I had never allowed myself to notice before. Her hair was slightly undone, falling over her shoulders in waves that caught the dim light. The lines of maturity on her face didn't hide her beauty, they deepened it, adding a kind of grace I hadn't seen in women my age. I poured myself water, the glass cool in my hand, and tried to keep my voice even as I answered. "Yeah. Just restless, I guess." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment longer than necessary. That pause, it unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. Then she smiled again, soft and knowing, and I swear the room grew smaller around us. We made small talk, nothing important, school, her day, the silly quirks of her son. Yet beneath every word, there was something unspoken. A glance that lasted too long, a smile that carried weight. The air felt charged, as though we were standing on the edge of something we didn't yet dare to name. I left the kitchen that night with my heart beating faster than it should have. It was just a conversation, just a smile. But it lingered. Long after I lay down in the guest room, I could still smell the chamomile on the air, still feel the warmth of her eyes on me. That was the night she stopped being just my friend's mom. The next few days, I found myself thinking back to that midnight kitchen moment more often than I wanted to admit. Something about the way she smiled in the quiet, the way her eyes lingered as though weighing an unspoken thought, it stuck to me. And when I saw her again, it was impossible not to notice her differently. One afternoon, my friend had gone out with other classmates, leaving me behind at the house. I was sitting at the dining table, flipping half-heartedly through my phone when she appeared, carrying a tray with 2 cups of coffee. "For you," she said casually, placing one in front of me. "Don't say I don't treat my son's friends well." The teasing in her tone caught me off guard. It wasn't sharp, but playful, carrying a faint warmth that made me grin in spite of myself. "I won't," I replied. "Though I'll probably still compare it to cafe coffee just to annoy you." She raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a smile that was more daring than polite. "Careful. I might just stop making you any then." I laughed, but beneath that laughter was the strange awareness of her presence, the way she leaned just a little closer as she set down the tray, the soft brush of her sleeve against my arm as she did so. It was brief, fleeting, but my skin reacted instantly, alive with a spark I pretended not to notice. We talked for a while, about small things mostly. She asked if I ever felt restless, like life wasn't moving fast enough. I answered honestly, and she studied me in silence before murmuring, "You speak older than your years. Most boys your age are too distracted to think about things like that." I met her gaze, steady, refusing to let her dismiss me as just a boy. "Maybe I'm not like most." Her lips parted slightly at that, not a full smile, but something that hovered between amusement and acknowledgement. She sipped her coffee, watching me over the rim of her cup in a way that made my pulse quicken. When she set it down, her fingers brushed the back of my hand as if by accident. But the pause that followed made it clear it wasn't entirely accidental. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. "You should be careful," she said softly, withdrawing her hand at last. "You don't know how dangerous curiosity can be." The warning in her words was real, but so was the glimmer in her eyes, daring me, testing me, seeing how far I would go. And for the first time, I wanted to find out. The kitchen had become our meeting ground. Not planned, not arranged, but somehow, whenever I found myself there, she appeared too, like fate enjoyed placing us in the same space. One evening, the air felt especially charged. My friend was upstairs, loud music thumping faintly through the walls, leaving us cocooned in our own quiet corner of the house. I had been leaning against the counter, scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone, when I sensed it, her eyes on me. When I looked up, she didn't look away quickly, not this time. She held my gaze, and in that second, something shifted. Her expression wasn't that of a mother looking at her son's friend. It was softer, searching, as though she saw me in a way she hadn't before, or maybe admitted it to herself for the first time. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry, and decided to test the moment. "You've been staring," I said, my voice low but steady, carrying just enough challenge to push past the surface. She blinked, surprised, her lips parting in a quick breath. Then she smiled, though it was faint, nervous, not her usual confident curve. "Have I?" she whispered, almost as if admitting it out loud might break the spell. "You have," I said simply, closing the small distance between us by leaning just slightly forward. I wasn't reckless, but I wanted her to know I noticed, that I wasn't naive. For a long beat, she said nothing. Her hand tightened on the stem of her wine glass, the faint tremor in her fingers betraying what her composed face tried to hide. Finally, she let out a soft laugh, one that wasn't humor so much as surrender. "This is just curiosity," she murmured, her voice almost fragile in its honesty. The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. Just curiosity. As if that explained the way she looked at me, the pauses in her sentences, the subtle touches she hadn't needed to give. I studied her, my heart pounding hard enough that I was sure she could hear it. But I didn't step back. I wanted her to feel that I wasn't afraid of the truth she had just spoken. Her eyes flickered away for the briefest moment, as if she regretted saying it, then returned to mine with a mix of defiance and vulnerability. And in that fragile space between us, I understood, a line had been crossed. It wasn't spoken, and it wasn't acted on yet, but the moment she confessed it as curiosity, it became something real. Something we both knew we couldn't ignore. Her words clung to the air like smoke, delicate yet impossible to ignore. "This is just curiosity." I knew she meant it as a way out, a careful explanation to keep the moment from collapsing under its own weight. But I could see in her eyes that it was more than that. It wasn't just curiosity. It was the pause in her voice when she spoke to me, the way her gaze lingered a little longer than it should, the tremor in her fingers when they brushed against mine. I took a slow step closer, closing the space until I could feel the warmth radiating from her body. My voice came out softer than I expected, steady but edged with the pulse rushing through me. "Then let's get addicted." Her head lifted at once, eyes widening, and for a second I thought she might laugh it off. But she didn't. She stared at me, lips parted, as if the boldness of my words knocked the air out of her. A slow, almost disbelieving smile tugged at her mouth, not the polite smile she wore for guests, not the teasing grin she gave me earlier. This one was sharper, charged, caught somewhere between shock and thrill. "That's dangerous," she whispered, her voice low, almost lost in the hum of the refrigerator. "Maybe," I admitted, keeping my gaze locked on hers. "But doesn't it feel worse pretending it's not there?" The silence stretched, taut and trembling. She set her wine glass down on the counter, her hand lingering just a little too long on the rim. When she finally let go, her fingers brushed mine, not accident, not hesitation, but deliberate. The contact was small, fleeting, yet it jolted through me like electricity. Neither of us moved back. If anything, she leaned closer, her perfume faint but distinct, curling into the space between us. I could see the way her chest rose and fell, slow but uneven, as though she was holding something inside she was afraid to let out. Her eyes searched mine, looking for a sign, of doubt, of immaturity, of recklessness. But I didn't give her that. I gave her certainty, calmness, the quiet proof that I knew what I was saying. Finally, she let out a breath, almost like a surrender. "You don't know what you're asking for," she murmured. I smiled faintly, letting my hand stay close to hers on the counter, close enough that the space between our fingers felt intentional. "I know enough," I said. And in that moment, the air shifted. Whatever thin line had existed between us, teasing glances, quiet curiosity, it was gone. We had stepped past it, together. After that night, everything between us changed. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, but every word we spoke carried a different weight. The silence between sentences grew thicker, almost magnetic, as though something unspoken was always pressing at the edges. It happened one evening when my friend had gone out again. I stayed behind, claiming I was tired, though in truth I didn't want to leave. She was in the living room, curled up on the sofa with a book. The lamp beside her cast a golden glow that softened her features, making her look both timeless and vulnerable. I hesitated at the doorway, not wanting to intrude, but she glanced up and smiled in that quiet, knowing way. "You can sit, you know. I don't bite." I laughed gently and sat down at the other end of the sofa, though not too far. Close enough that the space between us felt deliberate. The book closed in her lap as though she didn't care much about reading anymore. We talked, not about playful teasing this time, but about real things. She told me how, at her age, people expected her to have everything figured out, yet sometimes she felt more lost than ever. She admitted she feared becoming invisible, that the world didn't see women like her anymore. Her words struck deeper than I expected. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, listening with full attention. "That's not true," I said quietly. "You're not invisible. Not even close." The way she looked at me then, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief, stayed with me. It wasn't flattery she needed, it was truth, spoken by someone who saw her without judgment. Her hand rested on the sofa cushion, just a few inches from mine. I didn't reach for it, not yet, but I let my hand stay close, letting the warmth of our proximity do the speaking for us. My knee brushed hers lightly, and she didn't move away. Instead, her breath caught almost imperceptibly before she exhaled, steadying herself. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured, though her eyes never left mine. "It makes me forget who I'm supposed to be." I shook my head slowly. "Maybe you don't have to be anyone else when it's just us." Her lips parted as though to respond, but she stayed silent. Instead, she leaned back against the cushions, letting the quiet settle around us. A storm was brewing between us, not loud, not violent, but steady and inevitable. And in that silence, we both knew, this wasn't curiosity anymore. This was something far more dangerous, and far more real. The storm rolled in without warning. By evening, the sky had turned a restless gray, and soon rain pelted against the windows in steady sheets. My friend had gone out again, leaving the house unusually still except for the sound of thunder rumbling in the distance. She was in the living room, pulling the curtains half closed, when the lights flickered once, then went out completely. The house was swallowed by darkness, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning through the window. "Great," she muttered softly, though her voice held more amusement than annoyance. I found myself laughing, not because it was funny, but because the sudden darkness felt like the world itself was conspiring to leave us alone. I fumbled for my phone, using its dim glow to guide me to the sofa where she'd settled down. She was already there, sitting quietly, the storm painting shadows across her face. I sat close, closer than before, close enough to feel her warmth, close enough that the air between us felt charged. For a while, we didn't speak. The sound of the rain filled the silence, a rhythm that made every breath, every movement, more noticeable. Her hand rested near mine on the cushion, fingers loose, relaxed but open. In the dark, courage felt easier. I let my fingers shift ever so slightly until they brushed against hers. The contact was small, almost nothing, yet it was everything. She didn't move away. Instead, her breath hitched, the faintest catch that told me she'd felt it too. Slowly, gently, her hand turned, and her fingers intertwined with mine. Not forceful, not rushed, a quiet confession without a single word spoken. My pulse raced, but my grip was steady, holding her hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Lightning lit the room for a brief second, and in that flash I saw her face, eyes closed, lips parted just slightly, her expression caught between fear and surrender. Then darkness returned, leaving us in the intimacy of shadows. She leaned slightly into me, her shoulder brushing mine. Neither of us spoke, but the silence didn't need filling. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the stillness between us was louder than thunder. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. But it was real, the first undeniable act that confirmed what had been building between us. And in that quiet storm-lit moment, her hand in mine, I knew, we had crossed beyond curiosity. This was something neither of us could ever truly walk back from. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting the living room in soft, golden streaks. The air still carried the faint scent of rain, but the heaviness of the night had lifted. I woke to find myself sitting slouched on the sofa, her hand still resting loosely in mine. Neither of us had let go, even as sleep had claimed us. When she stirred, her eyes fluttered open slowly, adjusting to the light. For a moment, she looked at me the way someone looks at a dream they aren't ready to leave. Then she gave a quiet smile, the kind that reached her eyes and softened every line of her face. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice still husky from sleep. I squeezed her hand gently, my thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You didn't let go." Her smile widened just slightly, though there was still a trace of conflict in her gaze. She sat up straighter, pulling her robe around her shoulders, as though grounding herself back into reality. Yet her hand lingered in mine a moment longer before she finally eased it away. "Maybe curiosity isn't such a bad thing," she said, half to herself, half to me. Her tone was thoughtful, as if she was trying to redefine what had happened between us. I leaned back, studying her in the morning light. She looked different now, not in appearance, but in the way I saw her. No longer just my friend's mother, no longer just a fleeting attraction. She was someone I understood, someone who had trusted me with the parts of herself she hid from the world. "Curiosity is only dangerous when you run from it," I replied quietly. "But when you face it, maybe it's the only honest thing left." Her laugh was soft, almost incredulous, but there was warmth in it. She reached out, placing her hand briefly on my shoulder. The touch was light, but it carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. "We can't lose ourselves in this," she said gently, though her eyes betrayed the comfort she found in my presence. I nodded, respecting the line she needed to draw. Yet I couldn't stop myself from smiling as I answered, "Addictions aren't always bad, not if they remind you you're alive." Her expression softened, and for a moment, silence returned, not heavy, not uncertain, but peaceful. The world outside had moved on, the storm forgotten. Inside, though, something lingered, a quiet bond, fragile yet undeniable. It wouldn't be reckless. It wouldn't be rushed. But it would remain, a secret warmth, carried in glances, in unspoken words, in the memory of a night when curiosity turned into something neither of us could regret. And as the morning sunlight spread across her face, I knew, this wasn't an ending. It was the kind of beginning you never put into words, because words could never hold it.